Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. I see people asking questions. Have we started? Yes, we are officially starting right now. Thanks for giving us a second for everyone to come filing into the room. My name is Stojkovic. I'm the Executive Director of sf.citi. We are San Francisco's Tech Trade Association. We are excited to have you here at lunchtime. I know lunch is a very coveted time slot for each of you for a really great conversation. This is something that's come up a lot over the years as we've been working in the community in San Francisco, in particular with the tech industry, of how do we get people more engaged in the local community, and even more so, not just engaged, but really embed them in some of the nonprofits that are so important to the city of San Francisco. And over the years, I've been fortunate to talk to a number of people that have actually taken on board seats at these organizations. And we thought now would be a fantastic time to bring everybody all together to talk about how you can get more engaged and become a board member. So I'm going to do a couple quick housekeeping notes, and then of course we will pop up each of our speakers. We have some incredible speakers joining from some of the most noteworthy tech companies in the world and telecommunications companies. So I think we'll have a great chat today. So a few notes. First and foremost, we are doing a 45-minute panel chat. We might end a tiny bit earlier if we get a lot of questions. Our hope is to have a very dynamic conversation today and allow you to ask lots and lots of questions. So whether you are a nonprofit that is joining because you want to figure out how you can engage more tech employees, or on the flip side, perhaps you are a professional in the city that wants to get more engaged and become a board member about a nonprofit, those are the different things that we are going to discuss today, and hopefully lots of information that we can share. So if you want to ask questions, please drop them in down there. You see that little Q&A bubble? It's been 2+ years of Zoom. I think we all know the Q&A bubble at this point, but that button is where you can put your questions throughout today's chat. So feel free to drop them in at any time. You don't have to wait till we go to Q&A. We will get to as many questions as we can. Okay, the other big question that I always get asked when we do these webinars, of course, is this recorded? Do I have to write every single thing down, capture every link? The good news is, of course, it's recorded. We will share it out afterwards. So don't worry if you miss a couple things. Next, we are using the hashtag Board Leadership 101. So if you want to share any of your thoughts about today's conversation, sf.citi is pretty active on all social media accounts. So Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it. We'd love for you to share your thoughts today and use that hashtag so we know what you're thinking and we can continue to serve you with great conversations. With that being said, you guys have heard enough from me. Let's bring up our 3 incredible panelists. So let's do our virtual welcome onto the stage. You're going to see them pop up in just 1 second here. I've got Cammy and Hakeem and Ali, you are all here. Hi, everyone. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having us.
We're excited to have you. And Cammy always with the beautiful blue screen behind her. You always pop.
AT&T Blue.
Okay, she's got the branding. Okay, I love it. So we have 3 incredible leaders in the city that are all active both in the tech community as well as in the nonprofit community. So I'd love to go around the room real quick and introduce each of the panelists. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Let's start off with Cammy Blackstone, who is from AT&T. Also, little plug on the board of directors of sf.citi as well.
Yes. So I work for AT&T. I'm the director of external affairs. I've lived in San Francisco 41 years, and I'm on a whole bunch of boards. I've been on a whole bunch of boards, and I'm excited about this conversation.
You know, Cammy, as soon as we started thinking about people who are active on boards a few months back, you were the first person I thought of. There's nobody that has been on the same breadth of boards as you, Cammy Blackstone. So that's amazing. Yeah.
When you're as old as me, you end up like on a lot of different boards.
Okay, Hakeem from Salesforce, please introduce yourself and what brings you to today's conversation.
Hi, great. I just love your energy and vivaciousness. It's infectious. I hope I can bring it as well as you do. So Hakeem Oseni, I work at Salesforce in cybersecurity. I'm on 3 different boards in the city, all nonprofit. 2 are cybersecurity related, and 1 is Jewish Vocational Services, which is the mission is to help transform lives by giving people in the Bay Area skills and Bay Area living jobs. So jobs that pay above a certain amount so that they can live and have families in the Bay Area.
Amazing. And Ali from Google, just got a lot of heavy hitters today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Ali Vivinetto. I work in product marketing at Google on Google Ads, trying to get SMBs online. But I also am one of the co-founders of 826 Valencia's Associate Board. So very excited to chat about that amazing organization today, and also just share some tips and tricks if you are looking to join a junior or associate board or to get one started yourselves. So thank you. Very excited about this.
Amazing. All right. So I see a lot of people have funneled in as we have been doing our introduction. So just a reminder to everybody that has joined, questions, lots and lots of them, please send them our way. The thing that makes these conversations so dynamic is when we can talk to the audience and really engage you and build off of the conversations we're having. So please drop them in there as we're having the conversation. We'll get to as many as we can. So let's start off. We'll go around the room, the same, Cammy and then Hakeem and Ali. What made you want to join a nonprofit board?
Are we starting with me?
Yeah, Cammy, we're starting with you.
Okay, the first board I was on, I was still in a previous career and I was on radio. And so I think this board had wanted to have a little bit more, a little airtime. And so, I joined not having any idea what it meant to be on a board. And I just sort of like went to meetings and didn't really do anything, but I liked their mission. And since then, I've been on a number of boards, from like PTAs to now the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus and the San Francisco Chamber. But each of the boards that I have joined, I've joined because I believed in their mission. And that's kind of like, I think the key thing is making sure that whatever you do join, you believe in and you want to help them out. Was that your question? Now I'm forgetting what you just asked. Sorry.
Cammy, that was solid. I mean,
Okay.
you've done the breadth of it, and you truly embody what it means to be a San Franciscan. Hakeem, I'm curious, how did you get involved in the nonprofits that you support?
So I used to be a client of JVS. I was probably, I think I was part of their first Salesforce administrator training program, graduated, got a great job at Wells Fargo, and I just really wanted to give back, right? So, JVS found me at a time in my life when I really needed to pivot my career. I wanted to become part of San Francisco tech. I was coming from sort of traditional non-tech, and they really gave me those 360 support services to really launch my career and my Salesforce career. So I started giving back by mentoring some of the other students who are in their classrooms and programs. I got a seat on a committee to sort of shepherd the future of this program. And then one day, Abby Shanae tapped me on the shoulder and she was like, do you want to sit on the board? And I was like, well, that's strange. So of course, I really want to give back to people who've helped me get to where I am. Like, I think it takes a village to raise anybody in the Bay Area, right? I'm very passionate about what they do for people in the Bay Area, right? And all of their programs, from high school to technology to healthcare, like they really do have a lot of impact in the Bay Area, as well as helping steer policy to help people get jobs in the Bay Area.
That's incredible. So you went from client to board member.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And Ali, how did you get involved?
Yeah, so I moved to the Bay around 8 years ago, and was living in the Mission and was really trying to just find a way to get plugged into the community and be giving back, because I did feel like a transplant and I didn't want to just be working a tech job and just taking. I wanted to be a part of the community. So I actually did a great fellowship called Y-Core, and I'd love to plug Y-Core because my friend runs it and it's absolutely amazing. But Y-Core exists to connect young workers, mostly at tech companies, to nonprofits to do like consulting based projects. So I was working with a team of 6 people, and we were working on a project for 826 Valencia. We had a great time. And at the end of the project, everyone in the group was like, we need to find a way to stay connected to this organization. How can we keep building this relationship? They at the same time had been throwing around the idea of having an associate board. And so we worked with their director of development, and she was basically like, do it, start a board. Here's some people, recruit some people. So there's not really a ton of a playbook for that, but it was something we were able to get off the ground, and it's been 4 years now.
That's incredible. So each of you has a completely different way as to how you got into board leadership. Maybe Ali will, continue with this conversation with you. So what is a board? What does it mean to start a board? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are listening in today and they're thinking, oh, I volunteer a lot, or maybe I donate a lot, or I'm part of a program, I do skills-based volunteering. But what does it mean to take it to that next level? And then after that, I'll go to you, Hakeem and Cammy.
Yeah, I can speak to our experience. So those were the questions we were asking at the beginning. We're like, okay, we have a group of people. We know we want to start a board. What does that mean, and what do we do? So our associate board has 3 primary goals. The first and primary one is fundraising, raising as much money as we can, primarily from our peer set of young professionals. The second one is raising awareness. 826 Valencia has a great footprint in the city and is well known, but especially amongst people who are more established in the city and have been there for a long time. So making sure that people who are younger or recently arrived in the Bay know about their work. And then the third one is recruiting volunteers. 826 is entirely run by volunteers who are doing this tutoring with these children. And so getting more people excited about actually joining in. We primarily accomplish these goals through hosting events, in person and virtual, and those sort of help us recruit volunteers, raise awareness.
Did she freeze you for y'all? Oh no. Are you at the office, Ali?
Yes.
Oh no, we got to get some Google internet fix. You froze for a second
Oh
there.
no, was I frozen? I'm so sorry.
I think we got it. That was amazing. Thank you. Hakeem, what did you notice was, what took it from I'm just helping this organization to the actual board leadership responsibility? What key differences are there?
So I think it's having an input to the strategic direction of where the future of this nonprofit organization is trying to go, and the type of clients that they're trying to solve, and the social problems that they are trying to solve, right? Given COVID, given the new environment, given, right, things shift every 2 to 3 years, right? So this year it's inflation and, a downturn in the economy. 2 years ago it was, and boards and nonprofits need help to try and maintain their mission, make sure that they're marketing to prospective clients, prospective hiring managers, prospective donors. And I think being on the board gives you a seat to help drive that impact, right? And it makes you accountable to the success of their clients and their programs and their nonprofit mission.
So there really is an increased responsibility there.
Yes.
Yeah. Cammy, what have you kind of, over the many years and diversity of boards that you've been a part of, what have you seen as really that big change and something that perhaps junior board members or folks that haven't joined a board before maybe don't realize about what it means to join a board?
Well, I think what Hakeem said is spot on. I think that the responsibility totally changes. And I think that, when you are a volunteer, everyone's just so happy that you're there. But if you miss a day, it's okay. But if you're a board member, you are responsible for, like you said, the direction of the organization, and you want to make sure that you're involved in every step of the way and no surprises. And so it really is a change in, it's just a huge increase in the amount of work you need to do as far as understanding the organization and every aspect of it and the direction that it's headed.
Okay, so as we continue this chat, I'm going to pop a poll up so we can understand who is paying attention today. If you are joining as a professional that is interested in becoming a board member, or if you are a nonprofit looking to recruit, that way we can make sure we tier the conversation. Okay, wow. There is a lot of people that are interested in joining a board. Okay, so Ali, when you decide to put the board together, did you have to have conversations with your employer? What did that look like?
To be honest, absolutely not. Like I was working at a very small startup at the time, and this was completely separate and outside of my work life. We can definitely chat about like the benefits to work life and using skills that you use in your job, because I think all of that is important. But this board for me at least has been completely extracurricular.
Okay, so this was personal. Hakeem, Cammy, are either of these related to your professional?
Yes, for me, for all the boards I'm on. So I'm, I work at Salesforce. I used to do Salesforce projects at Wells Fargo. I'm trying to be part of the Salesforce administrator community at large. I also sit on some cybersecurity nonprofit boards of directors as well. So it's professional. And Salesforce, we have this 1-1-1, right? So
yeah,
it's part of work. It's also part of my passion as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, currently the boards that I sit on, they're all part of my job within AT&T. I would say, because I'm on the Union Square Alliance board and our flagship store is there, I'm on this board, and of course the chamber. So those are all very much work related. I've been on the board of the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus for 7 years, or 6.5 anyway, and that one started out as work related, but it is definitely a passion of mine. I really believe in that organization. So it's kind of a 50-50.
Okay, so very interesting. It looks like we have about a 75% audience of people that are joining to learn about becoming a board member. So let's really dive into what it meant for each of you to bring this into your life. I'm curious, we'll start again with you, Ali. How do you balance your work and your personal life and your board responsibilities? Because I think one of the things I've learned being on boards is that there can be a lot of time commitment depending on which board it is.
Yeah, I would say the number one thing is finding an organization you're passionate about and you're really a mission aligned with. We had a great event on Tuesday evening, and it was our first in-person event post-COVID, not post-COVID, but in this phase of COVID. And it was just so energizing to see people in person and to have so much energy around the organization. In terms of balance for me, it's just about carving out time. So like if I have free time on a weekend, I'll always try and carve out a few hours to work on whatever we're working on for the board stuff. But I think it's one of those things that if you find the right group and you're really excited about it, you'll make the time and you'll be able to carve it out.
What would you say is your time commitment you do every month? I'd love to paint the picture for people.
Yeah, so we have a monthly meeting. So that's around an hour and a half, and then there's probably an hour of prep leading up to the meeting. And then it really depends on where we are. So we just had this big event. I would say everyone was putting in closer to 5+ hours a week, just trying to get the sponsors and the silent auction and all of our partnerships in place for that. But now we'll be in a bit of a lull as we work on planning what's next.
Hakeem, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with what Ali said. If it's something you love, it's not really work, right? So I really love the board work I do. I feel inspired by some of my peer board members, especially those who are more senior than me, who've been around the Bay Area, who sit on corporate boards. I want to engage with them and talk to them to learn from them, because hopefully one day I'll be on a corporate board, right? I never really expected to be on a nonprofit board, but now I'm 3. So I really like what I do. Now let's get to your question. It's about 2 to 5 hours per week, depending on the season, right? So maybe if we're leading up to a Dreamforce, or if a class is graduating and they need additional mentorship or guidance, it's seasonal, but I try to carve out between 2.5 to 5 hours a week to make sure that, one, I'm actively engaged with what's going on, right? Because if you don't give time every week, you can lose touch with really what's there. There's a lot of reading, right? So part of being on a board is you are accountable, right? It's a 501c3. I have to read, and I make sure I do it for previously when I was sort of representing Wells Fargo, or now I'm sort of representing Salesforce, is I may try to read every line of every single document that comes across, right? Because I feel that that's my accountability to the nonprofit and to the clients and the people who give us money. So, but then I also learn, right? So I'm learning about how boards run, Robert's Rules of Order, how these large, like it's just a learning thing for me, and I really do enjoy it, and I've learned a lot from it.
Amazing. So that's a pretty big difference in time commitment, I got to say, between what you said, Ali, and what you said, Hakeem. What about you, Cammy? I mean, you've got a big breadth of board experience.
Yeah.
So they kind of depend on the year, depend on the organization.
Yeah, I think kind of what Ali said, and what I agree with what both Hakeem and Ali said. If like for me right now with the gay men's course, we've got big events coming up in the next few months, and so there's quite a bit of work to do. I try to, with the sf.citi and with the chamber and with the Union Square Alliance, it's a lot about bringing back economic vitality and getting people back into the office and that sort of thing. So there's quite a lot of conversation, but not as much hard work happening. So I would say, all of the boards that I'm on, we have meetings that, are an hour a week or whatever. And, or in the case of some boards, like once a month. But definitely I look at my Fridays and I try to carve out about 2 to 3 hours to really just kind of go through everything, that all the emails that I missed over the week from the board, so that I can kind of get back up to speed on what's going on with them.
It's like my Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, I'm curious then, with this like time commitment and things like that, what do you think was the biggest misconception that you had about joining a board, or what being a board member means? And I'll open that to anyone who wants to take it.
I'll take that one. The first board I was on, like I said, I didn't really understand like how they worked or anything. And I didn't realize that you were supposed to bring money into it. And I didn't have any money at the time. I was really early in my radio career. So I kind of I don't know, kind of kept my head above water a little bit. But now I feel like the boards that I have been with lately, they kind of tell you right off, whether it's a give or get board, your seat is going to require $5,000, and you can either give it to us personally or you can get it from someone else. And then I was also on a board that didn't necessarily ask for a financial contribution for your board seat, but you did need to commit to how many hours you would work. So whether you need to find out whether it's a working board, whether it's like a traditional nonprofit board where they just really want the money, or they want kind of a combination of both. So that kind of was a little bit of a surprise to me. The other surprise, once I started at AT&T, was how much my employer wanted to go over, the board information, whether it was the board of directors or the liability insurance, that sort of thing, because there was the worry, I guess, that AT&T thinks that if you're on a board that does something that goes out of business or whatever, would the company then be liable? So that kind of surprised me, the amount of risk management stuff I had to do.
Solid. Yeah. What about you, Ali and Hakeem? Thoughts?
Yeah, I would say going in, we didn't have a ton of conception. We were trying to do research about associate boards, and there were a few other ones in the city we talked to try and understand what they were doing, but it really was sort of just like an open playing field. I would say a junior or associate board is a really great way to get started, especially if the board you're interested in do have a big donation attached to them, because we also, like, everyone's bringing in money and we have fundraising goals and we bring in a solid amount of funds for the organization, but it's significantly stepped down from what the main board is doing. So it's really great when you're starting your career and you might not have $5,000 for a board seat.
Okay, so I'm going to take a bit from both of them. Yeah, the money thing did flip me out at first, right? But thank God I started out working for Wells Fargo, and they really helped mentor me into this board seat. I think that the largest surprise was I had a bit of imposter syndrome, right? I was like, who am I? Like I'm sitting, you know, with like people who sit on other boards. They're really, you know, EVPs at other banks and financial institutions. What value am I going to have to this conversation? But then I remember that we all have a voice, and we all bring from, you know, we all live in the same Bay Area. We all have the same problems. We have the same life. So I'm just bringing a unique opinion, right? I'm bringing my own experience to the table. And you know what I say matters, and it does have impact in that direction, right? And I think I was probably the first client who sits on the board, right? So I brought a very unique opinion to it. But it did take a while for me to get comfortable in that, right? So I had to sort of, I had some great board mentees or mentors, right? So that was probably the best thing that JVS did. They pair you up with somebody, and they're like, all right, they give you some one-on-one. And then, like I always said, like if you're ever invited to a meeting, make sure you say something and make sure you ask a question, right? So I always came prepared with like something, drops of knowledge, a little bit of intelligence. And then I always make sure to ask a challenging question. And one of the things I learned from boards was asking boss-like questions, like, you know, we want to help. You help 1,000 people, we want to take it to 10,000 people. How are you going to do that? Because the questions I used to ask were really small, like, you know, now I'm asking these bigger questions, which is what we need to do as leaders.
That's super solid advice. I'd love to actually, let's springboard off that for a second. It's something you said, Hakeem, about how being on a board is furthering your professional career, and you know how you're hoping to ascend to higher boards in the future. So how do each of you, and let's start with you, Cammy. We'll go Cammy, Ali, and Hakeem. How have you found that being on a board has helped your professional career, and what tips would you give to folks about how they can make it helpful to their career?
Yeah, I think that being on a board is a nonprofit board's invaluable in a number of ways. Well, I mean, one way would be the networking aspect. That's always really helpful. And then another way is, another thing is you can kind of take on positions within that board that is something that you want to gain experience in. So that's been really helpful. I guess I would also say a good thing about that I've learned from being on a board is I work for a really big company, and I sometimes feel like a little tiny cog that's like just not really accomplishing much. But then when you're on a board, you can really see a tangible impact that you're making in a easier, faster way, and it's really fulfilling. And so I think that, you know, those sorts of things really help you with your career as well. It kind of gives you a little more confidence, kind of gives you a little some more connections, and some different relationships that will help you have like a different perspective on the work you do.
I really appreciate each of you sharing such thoughtful and, you know, candid thoughts about it. And I think this is what's so important about this conversation is it is a vulnerable thing. You know, it is vulnerable to kind of put yourself out there and do this work. So Ali, how do you find that it's helped your career, especially since you're kind of keeping yours separate to your work at Google?
Yeah, I would say definitely agree with what Cammy said around networking. If there's like an aspect or a type of work you've always been interested in, like find out who on the board or who in the organization does that and see if you can help. Like I don't want to say low stakes, but it's a lower barrier to entry way to try out new things that you might be interested in. But I also just think from a work perspective, it really helps to show that you are a full human. We always talk at Google about bringing your whole self to work. And so my board seat is not related to my career, but I'm constantly sharing about 826 and the events we have coming up. And so I also think it's beneficial to your career because people can say, oh, look at her. She has a life outside of this office and she gives back to the community. And I've had a lot of people who I work with actually start volunteering or start donating because they've learned about the organization. So I definitely think there's ways to have the two things definitely benefit each other.
And I think that you're right. If there's a part of your career that you want to grow, well, for one, networking and just like learning how to be a boss, right? So it's and leadership. So learning how to be a boss leadership and politics, right? These are things you don't learn in the classroom, right? It's learned through experience. So just listening to the debate, listening to how people position themselves without attacking other people. It's the unspoken words or that je ne sais quoi, I don't quite know how to say it, but you still get your point across diplomatically, right? And as you get, as people say, like, as you get higher up in your career, it's not how much education you have, it's how you conduct yourself when there's pressure or when there's an incident, right? So I get to learn some of that from the board, but also it's like, at some point I was like, oh, one day I want to start my own company or whatever, and I need to raise funds. How do nonprofits raise funds? And I worked with Cyversity to sort of on a program. Then I worked with the sort of a leader there from Google and Kay Palmore. And I was like, okay, I'm going to watch you talk to various corporations and find out about their education programs and help raise funds. And, after doing this for a year and a half, I was like, I had the confidence to do it myself. So it's a way to learn from somebody. It's a way to figure out how corporations, for-profit corporations work. And it's also a way to practice some of those things that you feel insecure about or that you think that you're not good at.
That's really solid advice. I do think there's there's so much crossover you can get from learning how to fundraise. There is no facet of your life where learning how to fundraise will not come in handy. Whether maybe you found a company and you need to go fundraise from VCs, it's really, there's just so much overlap.
And talk about vulnerability. We talk about this a lot because fundraising can feel really awkward and scary when you start. And especially, it's one thing to have events and do that, but once you start reaching out to people in your life saying, I'm supporting this organization, it's really important to me, I would love if you could support. It's so scary when you start, and whenever someone new joins the board, they're like, I can't do that. And we're like, just ask 5 people for $20 and see what happens. And they're like, well, everyone said yes. And it's like, people want to help and people want to be a part of something. They want to support you. I have friends who couldn't come to the event and they're like, what can I do instead? How do I show up? How do I support? And so when you put yourself out there and you get over that initial hurdle, I think fundraising is a muscle and it's definitely something that takes practice, but I think it's more achievable than people necessarily think.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have a lot of audience questions that are popping in, so I want to get to those in a second, but let's just kind of do one last round robin kind of set of questions. We'll start with you, Hakeem, and then Ali and Cammy. So everyone's listening today. They've been listening for almost 40 minutes about all these amazing, pieces of wisdom about being on a board and how great it is and what it's going to do for their career, and they're jazzed and they're ready to do it. What should they do next?
Wow. Okay. So there are a couple of nonprofits that have events that invite people to sit on boards pre-pandemic, right? I forget what they're called. I think Ali, you might have mentioned
Board match.
Board match, probably. I remember I went to a couple of them. Two, just look in your local community, right? You can start with your religious organization. You could start with the local food bank. Ask to step up. And even if it's not a board seat, ask to chair a committee or ask to take some ownership of something, right? And then, figure out, be like, hey, it took me 2 years to get into one of my board seats, right? As a communication chair for ISSA. But just demonstrate show your interest and show up and volunteer and help out in some way and take ownership of a problem. Right? So if you're like, hey, this thing's not working too well, or I want to see more women, or I want to see more children, or there's part of the community suffering and we need to do this new program to support this thing, take ownership of it. And before you know it, people will invite you to be on boards.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I just find an organization you're excited about. And just leveling up the way you're involved. A lot of the recruiting we do come from, we look at who are our best and most consistent volunteers, who's really showing up. And then we ask them hey, would you be interested in joining this? And they almost always are because they've put that time in. I would say on the associate board front, if there's an organization and you don't know if they have one, ask. It's probably something that they've wanted to get to or they'd love to build out. So if you can put the right team in place, it's also something you could probably help create.
Yeah, I agree with everything just said. And I would also add into that there is the Board of Supervisors, the clerk of the board at San Francisco. I think it's called Maddie's list, I believe. And they have a list of boards, city-run boards, whether it's like, you know, the open space board or, you know, advisory board for Muni. Like there's all kinds of boards that you can do there as well, that are interesting if you wanted to be involved in more of like the civic part. But definitely for other nonprofits, Board Match is a great idea. And then just, you know, as was just said, you know, find those organizations that you admire, who share your interests or align with your interests, and then just ask, because more than likely they're looking for board members. It's rare that a nonprofit says, we don't want any more board members.
That is, yeah, that's really true. And that's a really good point, Cammy, because, you know, we've primarily been talking about 501c3s, like, you know, charities, right? But there's a lot of places where you can be a board member. You know, you can be a board member at the city level in a civic focus, like Cammy just said. You could also join other types of social organizations, other types of nonprofits that aren't just public charities. Like, for instance, with SF.citi, we're a trade association. One of the things that we do is we look at who are our most active members as well. You know, who would be good to step up and be a part of our board. And that's how we've cultivated probably 3 or 4 different board members over my time here. Has been starting the exact same way that each of you said. So, okay, we have a lot of questions. Y'all ready for them? I'm very excited to see how many, and it's exciting to see how many people have stayed on for this entire conversation, which really shows that like people are interested. And I can tell you from my earlier career, I definitely always thought about it, but had no idea where to start. So I hope that we are starting each of you today on your nonprofit leadership career. Here's an interesting one from Michael. What does the typical payment or incentive structure look like for nonprofit board members? Most that I know of do not pay.
Yeah, no, they don't pay. I think sometimes you're expected to raise a certain amount of money. Sometimes, and you know, sometimes they, yeah. So none of them really pay.
Yeah, if in my experience, that's the same. Cammy, have you seen differently because you've been on different types of boards?
I've never been paid to be on a board, but that may just be me. However, they do, you know, typically there is some sort of contribution that, you know, I've been asked to make, and whether it's from, you know, my job money or like my personal money, depending on what it is. But I think that's the structure I'm familiar with.
Yeah, and one of the things that I see pretty often and has been my experience is it's usually like a give or raise oftentimes. So it'll say, for 5,000 this year, yeah, give or get, or 2,500. I've seen a lot as well. Those are the 2 numbers that I see a lot. Do you guys feel like that sounds about right?
Yeah, and there's also some organizations will take, like, you know, rather than a give get, like an in kind, like if someone has an expertise in a certain area that they're able to, you know, contribute a number of hours to solve some certain problem as their give get.
Yeah.
Did Jen freeze?
I think so. I was trying to tell if it was.
Oh no!
You froze for a second.
That's so weird. It happened earlier too, but with one of y'all. You guys can see me now.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Okay, we've got people here. I just joined a nonprofit board. It's my first time. I'm here to learn. Well, I hope you were learning. How do we diversify boards? This is a great topic because one of the things I learned, my very first career was at United Way, which is a very, very old institution, 100+ years old, one of like the charities in America. And so many people that were on these boards had held these seats for very, very long time, or they'd been part of legacy businesses that had always had a seat. And it was interesting because we, you know, it would predominantly be the same age group on boards. So, and usually, you know, very often white, a lot of men. And we would have a really hard time trying to break into younger folks like millennials, or I mean, now Gen Zers at this point that are in the workforce. I'm curious how each of you at your organizations is working to diversify your board, especially as we have so many people that are retiring. You know, traditionally baby boomers were very active on boards.
I would say term limits are a good thing. Speaking from the San Francisco Chamber, which had traditionally been pretty much the same crew for a really long time, they're working really hard to diversify by you got to find out what the barriers are to people joining, to non-traditional board members joining, and then try and like figure out what you can do. So I know at the San Francisco Chamber, they've really reached out to a lot of small businesses to try and get different voices on rather than like the big corporations. And so that's one thing. I know at the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus, they're working to have seats that would be not necessarily like more community member seats rather than you have to be gay, you have to be a singing member, you know, that sort of thing. You just have to figure out what the barriers are and how you can sort of alter those, you know, make it possible for people to join.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add is just proactive outreach. And this is something we're working on in full transparency, but if you know someone and you think they'd be great, like reach out, see if they're interested, because it's not something a lot of people are thinking of, but a lot of people I think would be really excited to be asked.
Yeah, I would say, you know, I think Ali had mentioned that associate board. I know for a lot of my cybersecurity, we're trying to get that younger millennial Gen Z in because of the age of the current board members. The organization is looked at for professional people and not people entering the field. I think JVS is very intentional about adding women and people of color and non-binary people to their board of directors, because we want to reflect what our community is as we support them through the various programs. It's a journey, right? And I think that your board has to be intentional. And let's be honest, like the more diverse your board is, the more diversity of thought and innovation you're going to have, and the more relevant your nonprofit's going to be. The world is increasing at the pace of how it changes. So the quicker your nonprofit can adapt to that, I think the more relevant and the more people you'll be able to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. Diverse teams also build the best products, right? We know that. So we had a couple questions that were submitted ahead of time too. This is a great one, and I'll just throw it to whoever wants to take it. Raising funds in this current market for nonprofits. Cammy, you've been doing this a while, so you have seen this happen, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, raising funds is not easy in this current economic climate. However, I think when Ali was talking about how it's so nerve-wracking to ask people to contribute, but then they always do. One of the things that I was told when I was afraid to ask people for money was, you know, it makes people happy to give back. People want you think that they're gonna like to say, no way, and then they do, and they're so great. They're grateful for the feeling that they get by giving. So that being said, it is a tumultuous time. I know I spend a lot of my job feeling like I'm breaking up with people because organizations and nonprofits that had typically received, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars from AT&T, I now have to go back and say, it's not you, it's me. I only have 500 for you this year. Like, so it's tough. And I feel bad for all the nonprofits out there right now, and just hope that they can all muddle through this like kind of dark economic time.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and say it's definitely a challenge, but I think it's also an opportunity to innovate and look at how you raise funds, right? So some of the probably the best conversation I had this year was where we're trying to raise money to give people scholarships to take free cybersecurity certifications. And then one large company was like, well, why don't you bring that in-house and help us train our sort of frontline workers or our warehouse staff and like have an in-house program. And I was like, oh, so maybe we can start to partner with your own internal training, learning and development, because usually corporations have some money put aside for that, but give this a very cyber track, right? and so you have to get more creative ways to try and raise money. So don't just take, maybe it's like that pot of fund that we used is not there, but are there any alternative ways that we could get the same amount of funding or value or in kind from that same corporation? So I would say it's challenging, but there are more than one ways to downtown San Francisco.
I love
Awesome.
that. I also think it's a challenging time because there's so many issues, right? There's so much happening. And so how do you convince someone that your organization is worth investing in? And so I think a lot of that, like we work very closely with the 826 staff around narrative and talking about the work they're doing and making sure we're looking at the annual reports and seeing the impact they've had and telling that story. I think that's been really huge. I also think COVID was challenging. People have Zoom fatigue or they don't want to go to events unless they're spaced out. And so it's just a matter of like adapting as you go. I will say like we set goals every year and we set them based on what we think we can accomplish that year. So like we had a fully remote year during COVID and we set a lower fundraising goal because we do a lot of our fundraising through events. We still beat that goal, but we made more on Tuesday than we made last year. And so it's just like keeping reasonable expectations in mind as well, I think.
Yeah. I also think, from my own experience being on boards, like meeting the moment is so huge. Like for instance, I do a lot of stuff with like animal sanctuaries. One of the things that one of the sanctuaries I worked with did was they did Zoom meet like an animal. So you guys probably all remember in the early days of Zoom when we all had to start using it, you started to see these nonprofits that would pop up and you could have someone join your meeting just like today. And they would join with like a llama or something like that. And they came up with this idea and they ended up on CNN, MSNBC, everything you could imagine, and raised like hundreds of thousands of dollars for people to just pay to have a llama join them on screen because people just needed to cheer up. They just need to cheer up, So it's so important for nonprofits, I think, to stay timely with the work they're doing too. Awesome. Okay. So here's one great question actually. So I'm a new board member, just started. How can I be most effective in my first 6 months? Like any tips?
Be proactive and schedule one-on-ones with every single board member, even if it's 15 or 20 minutes. Find them on LinkedIn, join them on LinkedIn, go through their background, and then read all of their documentation, like their 501, their tax stuff, their website, their missions, and read like probably their past 3 years of annual reports, right? And that should set you up for success.
I would just say like, oh, go ahead, Cammy.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I would say like, think about your skill set, right? Like we've had some programmers on the board, and so they've been able to reach out to 826 and say, are there development projects that have been on the back burner? And they'd be like, oh yeah, actually like the online store has needed help for a really long time and we're short staffed. So even if it's not something that the board is already doing, like, can you carve out a place where your unique skill set is going to be super valuable and unlocking that next thing for them?
Yeah, and I was going to kind of say a similar thing as most boards have different committees, and find a committee that you think you can be most impactful. And I know earlier we were talking about how a board seat is a great way for you to kind of step into untested waters and try something different from your job, but maybe for the first 6 months, you kind of want to go into something that you feel that you have a lot of confidence in and that you can make a big impact.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I always help with events before I get into the treasury or things that are just not my specialty. Kathy from Meals on Wheels has a really great question. How long do you think someone should be on a board? We talked about term limits. Does anyone have any parameters they've seen work best?
I'll say, so myself and a few others founded this board in 2018. We have been working on succession planning and an exit path for a while now, mostly because our goal was not to found an organization for us to run. It was to start a group that can continue in perpetuity. So we have really great people in place right now. I'm hoping to roll off and actually find some new board or some other thing to sort of fill that time with. But I think a few years is probably best, just to keep new ideas. Every time we bring in new people, there's so much new energy, and I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, most of the boards that I'm on have like a 4-year cycle, which I think is good. And sometimes they have, you can have 2 of the 4 years, and then you have to take time off to come back. Kind of like the board of supervisors. But
I was about to say that.
I know.
It's like the Peskin clause.
Exactly. But I think I think 4 years is good, because you don't want to burn somebody out, and you certainly don't want to make somebody stay on who feels like they're done. So I think 4 years is sort of a good chunk of time that's not too long, and people will stay engaged that long, I think.
Yeah, I think I want to answer this like, what is a rhythm of the business, right? So it takes a year or a couple of years to really implement a strategy and see change, right? So, depending on the nature of the nonprofit and, your cohorts or the rhythm of intake, outtakes, what's the results, and what you want to get out of that board seat, right? So, as I stated, I want to mentorship. I want to learn how to raise funds. It's probably going to take me between 2 and 4 years, as Cammy said, to really get there. And then maybe I want to pivot to another board, right? Maybe I want to launch it to something else. So I think between 2 and 4 years is enough. I don't agree with people living on boards for a long time. I just think that the more, like, you can go from one nonprofit to the next, take ideas and just like have more fluidity, right? So, to get fresh ideas, you have to take old ideas and sort of, send them on their way.
All very, very good advice. So we are coming to the close of our hour. We have had a lot of people very participative, a lot of questions. I think that there's some real concrete actionable stuff that's been shared today. As a reminder to everyone, this whole thing has been recorded. So if you have had to step away so you can have a bite to eat, don't worry, we'll share it out. And that also is why we'll come to a close, because each of you have given us your amazing lunch break, and we really appreciate it. I'm doing my last lightning round question. Anybody that has joined one of my events before knows exactly what this question will be, but you all, your eyes are all lighting up. I think you might be newbies. We're gonna start with you, Cammy, then you, Ali, then you, Hakeem. Favorite place to eat in SF? Shout out a restaurant to support this weekend. Go.
Red Java House.
Wow. Super.
I've only eaten there once, but it was so memorable. Lazy Bear. but yeah, that was like, I was like, I need to take my husband there for honeymoon or something like that. I just thought that whole evening was the best.
I am going to piggyback off of Ali with Suvla, because one of my good friends launched Black Sheep Foods there a few months ago. It's the world's first plant-based lamb. And they just inked a deal with Delta Airlines nationwide.
Wow.
So if anyone's curious to try the very first plant-based lamb, it is absolutely incredible. At Suvla.
At Suvla, all right.
I'll have to try that.
I'm gonna go there now.
Awesome. Yeah, there you go. See, now everyone knows where to go. It's incredible. Well, thank you so much for your time, everyone. I can't wait till we are back as real life in person, hopefully soon. Thanks for joining, everyone. We will share everything out soon. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.